Hello everyone, this is Heather or Lady Plague Beast. Welcome to my channel. This is your first time, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. I did talk to Shan over the phone on Friday last week to talk about my type, and I also spoke with Dave a little bit over an email just to make sure that everything is good to go. I'm really into the whole keeping good data, so I wanted to make sure that they would have my typing as a data point for their research. That being said, I know I said before on this channel that I thought I was an INFJ. I've thought that I was an INFJ for a few years, probably closer to 10 years at this point. When I first started taking the Myers-Briggs test, I typed as an ISTP, and then later on I started talking with a friend who was really big on the typing community. She was like a big poster on Personality Cafe. She researched all the cognitive functions, and so I learned with her about more depth with the Myers-Briggs system and ended up settling on INFJ. Not because of the rarity. I don't care how rare it is. That doesn't matter to me. In fact, I think that INFJs aren't that rare. I seem to run into them a lot. But yeah, I was just like going through the cognitive functions and I was thinking, oh yeah, extroverted feeling. That sounds like me. I get affected by people's emotions. I like to, have open emotion talks, I guess. And so that seemed to fit, and the intuition seemed to fit. What I wasn't understanding though was that the way I was seeing introverted intuition was a combination of extroverted sensing with introverted intuition. So I thought the two functions together just made up introverted intuition. I thought, oh, of course it seems so deep for me since I'm an INFJ and that's my number one function, that it would be the one that had the most richness and the most depth, because that's the one that I used. Turns out I'm not an INFJ. Introverted intuition isn't my top function. I was right on the functionalities, like which functions I do have access to, like the TIFE versus the NISE. I have both of those. So at least I had some part of it right. As far as the order goes, that's where I was held up and uncertain, apparently. See, the thing is, when you have your number 1 and 2 functions, the two that work most together and the two that are strongest for you, those are the ones you don't really think about. You do them all the time, but it's natural, so you don't really perceive that you're doing them. They don't make a lasting impression of your memory of what I'm doing. But it's the lower ones, the ones that are the demon functions, said because they're less strong for you, they're less natural for you. Those are the ones that tend to make a more lasting impression. They're the ones that tend to cause the problems in your life. Rather, they're the ones that bring out the problems that you're causing in your life. Because really, we're all kind of responsible for our own emotional state. We're all responsible for our own decisions. And even if you have an influence from somebody else, you still make the last call when it's your life. So by continuing to have that victim mentality, that's really not a good look. That doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help you change, and it also kind of makes your friends tired of you. Sorry to be blunt, but yeah, nobody really wants to deal with watching the same person struggle over the same exact things over and over and over again and then not do anything to change it. But yeah, so it turns out that my intuition is fairly good. My extroverted sensory is fairly good. I like to grab a bunch of information. In fact, I can spend hours and hours and hours researching something. As long as I find it interesting, I can just eat it up. It gets so bad sometimes that I will be just losing track of time just because I'm on, I'm like a glutton at a feast when it comes to just learning. I've always kind of known that about myself. It's one of those things where I'll lose track of time. And I find it fun. I find just absorbing stuff fun. Again, I thought that was part of my introverted intuition, but it turns out that's my extroverted sensory, just gathering up the real life, substantial, provable facts. Yeah, where does that leave me? It leaves me with introverted thinking on the top of my stack. And that's, well, I guess technically I was right the first time. I was correct in diagnosing myself the first time when I took the Myers-Briggs test and came out with an ISTP, because I am an ISTP. That introverted thinking I have is feminine, however, so I've always been struggling with who I am, what's my identity. I care about data a lot. I care about researching data, analyzing data, finding meaning in data. I care about stuff that, most people would find boring, I guess, but I find fascinating. I got a Fitbit a couple years ago. It said Charge 2. I got it specifically because I wanted data about my sleeping schedule, and I wanted data about how much I was exercising, how much I was walking every day. That started when I had a Nintendo 3DS that kept a little tracker of how many steps you're doing, because it had the little rattle thing inside. And so every day I would carry it around with me just to see how far I walked, how many steps I did, whether I had more steps yesterday than I did today, or whether this week I'm being lazier than usual. Yeah, and then it comes to dealing with other people's stress. I think I've mentioned before that I am very aware of other people's feelings, and that kind of isn't the best for me, but I can't help it. That's just something I am. I feel sick when other people are expressing lots of negative emotions. Like if somebody's sad a lot or angry, especially angry, I just get overwhelmingly ill and feel nauseous and just want to avoid everything to do with it. But I thought, oh, that must be my FE acting up, because oh my gosh, all of this stuff is just pouring from them and into me, and I can't do anything about it. And I guess I was right. It was my FE, but it was my FE in a demon state, which is not a natural state, really. That's something coming in that I don't have full control over. Somebody who's truly FE up at the top would have that natural kind of flow with it, and it's just, that's how it is, and they don't feel stressed out or bogged down about all of that, all of the emotional junk. I know in the past that I've had experiences where somebody I cared about was frustrated and just crying and needed help. And yeah, sometimes I'll get into it with that sort of savior state of mind where, oh no, I want to handle this so you don't have to. And then I'll end up crying with them and holding them. But most of the time, 95% of the time, I guess, somebody will come to me talking about, okay, so this, and this is so bad right now. Oh, the world is blowing up because they're having some emotional response. And logically, I know they can't help it. They're looking for support. They're not doing it to, jab an emotional knife into me or anything. But I just have two states, whether I can detach and just remain unaffected emotionally, and then I can you know, watch that and work with it as sort of a fixer, sort of like, well, here's the situation you have, this is where it's wrong, if you want to change your situation, here's some things you can do. Otherwise, if I try to jump in an emotional state, I'll just end up sick and crying with them, and then we're both just crying and it's a mess. I want to be compassionate, but not goopy, not overly compassionate, because that ruins everything. You're not helping anyone by coddling them, especially if they're having the same problems over and over again. Unfortunately, I have a couple friends that have had problems that just keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and I've gotten to a point where I point out when they're coming back, and it's like, I've already given you advice on this, I don't know what else I can do with you. And they still haven't come to terms with, oh, maybe I need to do something about this, which is also frustrating for me, but that is just how it is. But that's not saying that I am a cold lizard person or anything. Like, I'm not emotionally broken. I'm just, I guess, more in control of the emotional state. Well, no, not really. I'm not in control of it. I find it crazy and hard to grasp. I hardly ever know how I'm personally feeling, for instance. But I care. I can't care so much that I let it halt me and keep me from going forward. Yeah, so it also, as my friends have pointed out now that I've come clean and told them that I am an ISTP and not an INFJ like I thought that I was, that it explains some of my weirder habits. But like, if somebody is talking about like some tragedy that has happened in their life, I try to be respectful, but I'm like, I mean, I would have already gotten over that before. Like, I'm no stranger to loss personally, and yes, I still grieve. In fact, this morning I took one of my pet rats to the vet. Well, I took two of them to the vet, but one of them, she was having like a diarrhea issue on Monday night. She had bad diarrhea. She was having lethargy. She keeps going on and off again lethargy, which means like during playtime, instead of playing, she either sits in a box the whole time or she curls up on my leg. And she's not a cuddly rat. She has never been a cuddly rat, but she'd come up onto my leg and just sit there letting me pet her for the entire playtime. And it's like, that's unusual. I called to make the vet as soon as I could, but I couldn't get seen until today. The vet was concerned. Her abdomen was swollen. She apparently had a few masses in her gut, and so we opted to do an x-ray. I actually was the one that brought it up. The better procedure would have been an ultrasound, but they don't work so well on small animals, so we went with the x-ray. And as soon as, like, I kind of figured when I brought her into the vet that she would be put down today. I wasn't wrong. Turns out her entire abdominal cavity and some of her peritoneal cavity, they were filled with fluid, and the tumors must have been cancerous to produce that much fluid over such a short amount of time. So the prognosis was terrible. There was a very, very small chance that we could do anything to ease her suffering, even if they went and took samples and biopsies, did surgery. So we made the decision to put her down. And I cried. I cried when I was alone in the office where nobody could see me. And I cried a little bit when I was writing her little mini memorial for for a Discord server I'm in, which we're all fans of rats. But I feel like since I'm so used to loss and I'm so accustomed to how that feels and the process of it, that I'm able to take that, I'm able to mourn, and then I'm able to move on and not let that affect my entire life. And I know sometimes I'll still think about either Nightingale or one of my other rats that I've lost in the past, or my family members who I've lost, and I'll think about them and I'll get that little pinch of sadness, but it's not really something that I'm afraid of, really. I feel like I've processed it, but I know I've had emotional and mental health issues for my whole life, so maybe I haven't processed it as well as I thought I did. Either way, it might come up eventually in therapy, who knows. But yeah, it explains how I have that sort of detachment when it comes to life and death. For instance, we also had a cat in my apartment complex. One of my neighbors lets her cat outside, which is a bad idea. Don't do that, because it screws up the ecosystem and it puts your cat in danger, so just don't do that. But this person lets her cats out, and I can't control that person, so I can't really do anything about it. But yeah, she let the cats out. Cat got hit by a car at one point. The person who hit the cat luckily was a good human being and picked up the cat and took it to the vet. And she was broken and battered. I think they eased her suffering at the vet and just put her down, or maybe she was already gone when she got to the vet. I'm not sure which. But the my roommate, who is definitely not the same type as me, she was crying about it. This cat that wasn't even her cat. She was sobbing because that was a cat that she knew, that was a cat that she loved, and she'd never get to see that cat again. That cat is gone. But for me, I was just pissed off at the owner for letting the cat outside. Like, you don't do that. You don't let your cat outside and then expect nothing bad to happen, because that's just foolishness. But I can't really do anything there. I think that the point that I'm trying to make is, when somebody's suffering, I'll suffer with them. I will feel that pain with them. And so suffering for me is terrible. I hate it. I hate the idea of pain, or, dehumanization, or just treating anyone who is in a lower position poorly. Don't even get me started about the whole issue at the border right now, which is disgusting. But with the idea of loss with my roommate, that was more of a personal hit to her. She doesn't know how to process that. So to her, it's the loss that's more devastating than the suffering. I remember I had a cat named Maru, who I really loved, and he had a liver problem. We took him to the vet, and the vet was doing all these expensive diagnostic things. I had to spend $6,000 on blood transfusions alone. Yeah, he had some hemolytic anemia. That means his blood was clotting inside of his veins. And about halfway through the initial, first 2 weeks of this issue coming up, I was thinking, I need to put this cat down. I don't want him to suffer. I made the bad decision of continuing his treatment, and, I felt selfish the entire time. And part of it was because my roommate was with me at the time, and she was uncomfortable with the idea of losing him, and I was uncomfortable with the idea of dealing with her emotions after losing him. So I made the choice to keep him around. He ended up living an extra year. Not the best year of his life, but Like, he spent 9 months on a feeding tube, like, in the back of his neck, and I would have to give him, like, medicine. I'd have to wake up early, give him one medicine, and then, like, an hour later, feed him and give him the other medicines he was on. And I was okay with that part. The part that I wasn't okay with was seeing him, you know, still deteriorating, and seeing him be less of an active cat than he used to be. And then a little over a year later, I was in Austin visiting family, and my roommate said he was feeling sick, he had diarrhea, she had to give him a bath, and then when I got back, I called the vet, took him to the vet. He was suffering from his hemolytic anemia again. He would have needed another blood transfusion, and so I made the decision then and there that it was time to say goodbye to him. And so that's what I did. And yeah, I mourned for that too, but I'm able to talk about it and experience, you know, healing from it, I guess, just because that's the kind of person I am. So yeah, to give the TLDR of this video, I thought I was an INFJ for 10 years. Worked out my intuition and extroverted feeling super hard, thinking I was an INFJ, so I was doing a bunch of INFJ things, like tarot cards and spirituality and everything like that, which I still love, and I still get benefit from it. But I'm not an INFJ, I'm an ISTP. My function stat goes TISENIFE. So I had myself kind of upside down a little bit. I knew I was an introvert because I'm definitely an introvert. I'm just now starting to feel more comfortable talking to a camera, so at least I have that going for me. See, if you do something that's hard for you, if you keep doing it, it eventually get less hard, which is what I'm noticing with this whole YouTube thing. Thank you for coming. Feel free to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or any requests of what you want me to talk about next, leave that in the comments, and I'll get back to you. Have a good one.